Hello. The marble floors of Harrington and Chase gleamed like ice under the fluorescent lights, the kind of sterile brilliance that announced, only the right kind of people belong here. Amina Clark smoothed her navy blazer with fingers that barely trembled. She had prepared for this day with the same meticulous care she brought to everything in her life. Her natural hair was braided tightly into a professional bun, her portfolio was immaculate, and her references glowed like beacons. Yet as she approached the gleaming reception desk, she felt the heavy gaze of judgment even before a word was spoken. The receptionist, a blonde woman with lacquered nails tapping rhythmically against her keyboard, didn't bother to smile. Her eyes flicked to Amina's deep brown skin, her modest but pristine outfit, and then away as if dismissing her entirely. "Deliveries go around the back," the woman said without looking up. Amina cleared her throat politely. "I'm here for an interview. Amina Clark. 10:30 appointment with Mr. Raymond Whitmore." The receptionist's manicured brows knitted together. She flipped through a clipboard half-heartedly. "Whitmore," she muttered, lips pursed. "Uh-huh. You sure you got the right building, sweetheart? We don't usually, conduct interviews." She trailed off, the implication hanging in the air like a bad smell. "Yes," Amina said crisply. "Harrington and Chase. Top floor. Scheduled by Director Matthews himself." The receptionist's face twisted in something between confusion and disdain. She picked up the phone, dialing briskly. "Yeah, Ken, there's, someone here. Claims she has an interview." Looks, she lowered her voice, but Amina still caught the word urban. "You want me to send her up?" Amina kept her posture rigid, staring past the woman's judgmental eyes at the sterile walls. After a brief exchange, the receptionist slammed the phone down. "Elevators are that way," she said flatly. "Don't touch anything." As Amina walked toward the elevators, she heard a snicker from a sharply dressed man waiting nearby. "Hope they don't think she's delivering lunch," he whispered to another associate, both smirking as they watched her pass. Inside the elevator, she exhaled slowly. Stay calm. Endure. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had trained for this moment her entire life, to break through walls built long before her first breath. The elevator chimed on the 40th floor. Amina stepped out into a hallway lined with glass offices, the view overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. She moved with measured steps to the waiting area where 3 other candidates sat, all white, all crisply confident in expensive suits. They glanced at her, exchanged almost imperceptible smirks. One man, lounging arrogantly with his legs splayed wide, muttered, "Guess they're lowering the bar this year." Amina sat down, back straight, portfolio balanced on her knees. She pretended not to hear, but the heat crept up her neck. Every second felt longer than the last. A door opened down the hall. Out stepped Raymond Whitmore, silver-haired, heavy-jowled, wearing a 3-piece suit that screamed old money. His pale blue eyes swept the room and landed on Amina with an expression somewhere between disbelief and annoyance. "Miss Clark," he called, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge. She rose smoothly. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." He did not return the greeting. Instead, he jerked his head toward his office. "This way." Inside, the office was an altar to privilege, leather chairs, mahogany bookshelves, framed Ivy League diplomas. Whitmore sat heavily behind a monstrous desk and gestured to the chair opposite him. "Resume," he barked. Amina passed it across. He barely glanced at it before tossing it onto the desk with an audible thud. "Impressive," he drawled, voice thick with sarcasm. "Harvard, huh? Full ride, I assume?" His eyes flicked to her with a knowing glint. "Yes. Merit-based scholarship," Amina said evenly. "Of course," he said, smiling tightly. "Affirmative action does have its benefits." She said nothing, locking her face into a mask of polite neutrality. "Tell me, Miss Clark," Whitmore leaned back, steepling his fingers. "What makes you think you're a cultural fit for Harrington and Chase?" Amina blinked once, slowly. Cultural fit, the coded language that had kept boardrooms as white as freshly fallen snow for generations. "Excellence transcends culture, sir," she replied. Whitmore's lips twitched into a cold smile. "Maybe in your world, dear." The questions that followed were thinly veiled barbs. Had she ever worked in an environment that demanded strict professional decorum? How did she handle feedback, particularly regarding her demeanor? Could she adjust her communication style to fit traditional expectations? Translation: could she tone down who she was enough to be tolerated? Through it all, Amina answered with perfect, lethal precision. Each reply as sharp and polished as her patent leather shoes. Finally, Whitmore stood. "Thank you, Miss Clark." "We'll be in touch," he said dismissively, already turning away. As Amina gathered her things, he added, almost as an afterthought, "You might want to consider positions more suited to your background. There's no shame in knowing your place." Amina paused, letting the words settle into the heavy silence. Then she smiled. Because today, she was exactly where she needed to be. Amina stepped back into the marble corridor, the air-conditioned chill slicing through the armor of her resolve. She walked past the other candidates, feeling their smug stares trail her like venomous vines. As she passed, one of them, a lanky man with a sharp jawline and slick-back hair, whispered loudly enough for her to hear, "Guess they're letting in diversity hires for the photo ops now." The others chuckled under their breath. Amina kept her eyes forward. At the end of the corridor, a young intern awaited her, clipboard in hand, expression carefully blank. He gestured for her to follow him. "We'll be conducting a group panel," he said without warmth. "Hope you can keep up." The conference room was cavernous, cold, and ringed by 10 executives, all white, all staring at her as she entered as if she'd tracked mud across their pristine ivory floor. Whitmore took his place at the head of the table, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate, ostentatious care. "Miss Clark," he drawled, "we've decided to make this a more interactive session." Amina took her seat, setting her portfolio precisely before her. "We want to see how you handle pressure," he continued, exchanging a wink with a heavy-set man to his right. The questions came fast, vicious, dripping with condescension. "What would you say," asked a thin woman with icy blue eyes, "to reassure a client who might feel uncomfortable seeing you representing their brand? Do you have experience adapting to environments where a pause heavy with disdain, polish, and presentation are critical? Are you willing to undergo additional training to help you better align with our firm's image standards?" Another executive asked, emphasizing the word standards with a smirk. "Some of our international clients," said a round-faced man with a hint of a southern drawl, "aren't accustomed to your kind of assertiveness. How would you avoid coming off as," he tapped the table for effect, "abrasive?" Each question was a blade dipped in poison. Still, Amina answered with an unwavering voice, each response crafted with the skill of a surgeon, logical, unflinching, unimpeachable. But she could feel it. The panel wasn't listening. They were watching, judging, waiting for a crack. The heavy-set man, Mr. Langston, according to his gold nameplate, leaned forward, lacing his fingers. "Let's cut to it, Miss Clark," he said, voice dripping with patronization. "You're clearly bright. But this firm is heritage, tradition, a certain type of pedigree." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had never been told no by anyone he respected. "You might find," he continued, "that you'd thrive better somewhere a little more urban. Less," he waved a hand vaguely, rigid. The room chuckled softly. Whitmore chimed in. "Nothing wrong with aiming for firms that celebrate diversity quotas. They need talented folks like you." The message was clear. You don't belong here. Amina's blood roared in her ears, but her face remained a mask. She smiled, a razor-thin smile that revealed nothing. "Thank you for your feedback," she said coolly. "One last question," Whitmore said, tapping a pen against the table, "and do be honest." His blue eyes glittered like frostbite. "Do you really believe you're better than the dozens of, let's be honest, better prepared candidates we've seen today?" The other executives snickered. For a heartbeat, Amina said nothing. Then she met Whitmore's eyes, steady and unflinching. "Yes," she said simply. The room fell silent for a fraction of a second. Then Langston gave a low, mocking whistle. "Well, I'll say this," Whitmore said, standing up and straightening his jacket. "You've got spirit. Might not take you far here, but it's cute." The panel rose as one, gathering papers, shaking hands with each other pointedly while pointedly ignoring Amina. She sat motionless as they filed out, her pulse hammering in her throat, her hands clenching the arms of her chair beneath the table where no one could see. The receptionist reappeared at the door. "You can see yourself out," she said with a thin smile. As Amina stood, lifting her portfolio, she heard Langston murmur to Whitmore, "Maybe she can try for a job in the mailroom." Their laughter echoed off the marble as she walked out, spine straight as a blade, head high. The humiliation was complete. Or so they thought. Because as she exited the conference room, Amina reached into her pocket and pressed a small button on a discreet device clipped to her blazer. The recording, every vile word, every demeaning snicker, had been captured in full. And her real work was just beginning. The elevator doors slid shut behind Amina with a soft chime, but the roaring in her ears only grew louder. The tight, artificial air of the building pressed against her skin. She leaned against the mirrored wall for a second, letting the weight of it all settle. Then she straightened, smoothed her blazer, and exhaled slowly. It was time. Back in the lobby, the same receptionist gave her a disdainful glance. "Lose your way, sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy sweet and sharp as glass. "No," Amina said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Without waiting for a reply, she strode across the marble floor and out into the blinding morning sun. Her car was parked in a public lot down the block. As she walked, she dialed a number from memory. It rang once, twice. "Agent Kessler," a voice answered briskly. "Phase 1 complete," Amina said. "I have everything." "Good. Get to the safe site. We'll proceed as planned." She ended the call and kept walking. Inside Harrington and Chase, the smugness festered like a disease. Langston, Whitmore, and the others congratulated themselves over catered lunches and private dining rooms, never once imagining that anything had shifted. "Honestly," Langston said, cutting into a rare steak, "I don't know why we even entertain these applications. Lowering the standard just to tick a box." "Public relations," Whitmore said with a shrug. "Show we're inclusive. Parade a few urban faces around the website, you know?" He chuckled, raising his wine glass. The others laughed. "Maybe we can get her to smile for a photo before we send her packing," sneered the thin woman who had questioned Amina so viciously earlier. "Make sure she doesn't look too militant." "Doubt she'd make it through the background check," muttered another executive. "Probably has some skeletons." "They always do." The table buzzed with laughter, callous and confident. But across the city, Amina sat in a sleek, unmarked office, uploading the full audio and video recordings to a secure government database. Her real title wasn't job applicant. It was Special Investigator, Civil Rights Division. For months, Harrington and Chase had been under quiet scrutiny, complaints of discriminatory hiring, whispered rumors of systemic exclusion. But evidence had been elusive. Until today. As the files transferred, Amina wrote her preliminary report. She detailed every loaded question, every contemptuous glance, every casually racist comment. She included a full transcript of the so-called interview panel, their laughter, their sneering dismissals. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair, feeling the fire settle into something colder, sharper. The next morning, the first blow landed. An anonymous tip, complete with select audio clips, found its way to the inboxes of several major news outlets. Within hours, headlines began flashing across screens. Harrington and Chase accused of racist hiring practices. Exclusive audio released. The firm's PR team scrambled, but the evidence was too clear, too damning. Viral clips flooded social media, Whitmore's drawl dripping with sarcasm, Langston's mocking laughter, the woman's snide remarks about urban fits. The comments section exploded. Disgusting, but not surprising. Another day, another elite firm caught being openly racist. Imagine how many qualified black candidates they crushed without us ever knowing. Inside Harrington and Chase, panic bloomed. Emergency meetings were called. Statements were drafted and redrafted. Blame shifted from one executive to another like a hot coal no one wanted to hold. By noon, several of their largest clients, tech giants, banks, a major hospital network, were issuing statements of concern and suspending partnerships pending investigation. Whitmore stormed into Langston's office, red-faced and seething. "Who the hell recorded us?" he barked. Langston, rattled but defiant, snapped back. "It had to be one of the damn staffers. Get HR on it. Threaten to fire them all if we have to." "No," Whitmore said, breathing hard. "It was her." Langston blinked. "That girl?" "Clark. You think this just happened?" Whitmore spat. "We were set up. This was a goddamn sting." The realization hit Langston like a punch. "Then we're screwed." Whitmore slammed his fist onto the desk, rattling the polished wood. "Not if we control the narrative first." They didn't know that it was already too late. And Amina? She watched it all unfold from her anonymous office, her face calm, her resolve harder than ever. Because justice wasn't just about one headline. It was about pulling the entire rotten foundation into the light. The atmosphere inside Harrington and Chase had curdled from smug superiority into frantic damage control. Whitmore called an emergency executive meeting in the glass conference room overlooking the Chicago skyline. But today, the view offered no comfort. The executives sat stiffly around the table, faces pale, eyes darting like trapped animals. First, Whitmore barked, slamming a thick folder onto the table. "We need a fall guy. Someone low enough that the board thinks we're taking it seriously but not important enough to matter." Langston shifted uncomfortably. "We could say it was the receptionist," he suggested. She let that. He caught himself, glancing at the others, that girl into the interview without proper vetting. The thin woman snorted. Please. The public won't buy that. Whitmore leaned forward, his face a mask of fury. Then we need to create a narrative. Rogue employee. Miscommunication. Diversity misunderstanding. Spin it. Across the city, Amina was 5 steps ahead. She sat in another anonymous office, reviewing the next phase of evidence, emails, internal memos, reports from whistleblowers emboldened by the leaked recordings. Each piece meticulously documented the firm's decades-long culture of exclusion. A new story was being built, brick by damning brick. At Harrington and Chase, the executives squabbled viciously, paranoia blooming. If we issue a full apology, we look guilty, snapped Langston. If we don't, the clients keep pulling out, the thin woman retorted. We're hemorrhaging money. Whitmore rubbed his temples. We need an internal investigation. Our investigation. And who runs it? Someone asked. Whitmore smiled thinly. Someone we control. They didn't know that Amina had already secured a federal subpoena for the firm's internal communications. Control was slipping through their fingers faster than they could scheme. Outside, the media frenzy escalated. Protesters gathered on the sidewalks with signs reading "Racism has no place here" and "Qualified, not tokenized." News vans parked outside the building. Cameras pointed at the front doors like guns. Inside, employees whispered in hallways, glancing fearfully at every suit that stormed past. Junior associates packed up their desks quietly, resumes already circulating elsewhere. By Thursday morning, the managing board intervened. Whitmore, Langston, and the thin woman were summoned to an emergency closed-door meeting. The chairman's voice was cold as steel. Effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending a full external review. Langston blanched. You can't do this. We can, the chairman interrupted. And we must. The firm's survival demands it. Whitmore's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. As security escorted them from the building, the protesters outside erupted in cheers. Amina watched the live coverage from her office. She allowed herself the barest hint of a smile. But she wasn't finished. Because deep within the file she'd unearthed was something even bigger, evidence that Harrington and Chase had systematically funneled minority candidates into lower-paying diversity roles, deliberately blocking their advancement while showcasing them in marketing materials. The final blow was yet to come. And when it did, it would not just be Whitmore or Langston who fell. It would be the entire rotten structure they had built. By Friday morning, the storm that Amina Clark had orchestrated had turned into a full-blown hurricane. Major clients had terminated their contracts. The firm's stock, traded as part of a holding group, plummeted by 12% overnight. Protesters now numbered in the hundreds, their chants reverberating through the glass towers downtown. Justice for the silenced. And end systemic racism now. Inside the now crippled Harrington and Chase, skeleton crews manned the phones as cancellation after cancellation rolled in. The partners remaining knew the fortress was collapsing from within. Then came the final strike. At 10 a.m., Amina's team held a live press conference, aired on every major network. She stood at a podium bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice, a place she had rightfully earned. The reporters buzzed with questions, but Amina raised her hand for silence, her presence commanding. After a comprehensive investigation, she began, we have determined that Harrington and Chase engaged in systemic discriminatory hiring and promotional practices in direct violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Flashes of cameras popped like fireworks. Evidence reveals deliberate marginalization of minority employees, misuse of diversity initiatives for marketing purposes, and the implementation of unwritten policies designed to prevent minority advancement. She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. The Department of Justice will be pursuing federal charges against senior leadership, as well as civil penalties totaling over $75 million. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras zoomed in. And for the first time since the beginning, Amina allowed herself to feel it. Vindication. Meanwhile, back at Harrington and Chase, pandemonium reigned. Whitmore, watching from the lounge of an exclusive country club, hurled his whiskey glass at the television, shattering it. She set us up, he roared. That little. His lawyer, a thin man with tired eyes, cut him off. That little girl, he said flatly, is now your worst nightmare. By the afternoon, federal agents raided the firm's offices, seizing documents, laptops, and tire servers. Handcuffed executives were paraded out the front doors in full view of the media, a symbolic march of the fallen empire. Whitmore was arrested that evening, charged with obstruction of justice, perjury, and multiple violations of federal employment laws. Langston and the thin woman followed soon after, their faces plastered across every news channel. But the true twist came not with their downfall, but with Amina's rise. At a second press conference held later that week, the Attorney General announced a sweeping initiative, Operation Equal Access, a national task force dedicated to rooting out systemic discrimination in corporate America. At its head, Special Investigator Amina Clark. Her face, the same face that Whitmore and his ilk had dismissed, mocked, and underestimated, now graced the cover of every major newspaper and magazine. The woman who took down a giant. Yet through it all, Amina remained composed. She accepted accolades with grace, gave interviews with measured confidence, and reminded everyone who listened that this was never about revenge. It was about justice. About honoring the countless others who had been turned away at locked doors, silenced in boardrooms, pushed to the margins. As she stood once more in front of the Department of Justice, preparing to lead the first task force meeting, Amina paused for a moment. She thought of every sneer, every slight, every door slammed in her face. And she smiled. Because sometimes, the most devastating revolution doesn't roar. It walks into the room wearing a navy blazer, carrying a portfolio, and refuses to bow. The fortress had fallen. And Amina Clark had built something stronger in its place. Amina Clark proved that real strength is quiet, focused, and unstoppable. She changed everything without ever raising her voice. What would you have done in her place? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit that like if you believe in standing up the smart way. Stories like this show that the real battles are fought with patience and strategy.